And let's begin the 2023 budget information session. Introducing. Mr. Kenny.
Thank you very much for having me today. Purpose of today. I'd like to introduce to the public some of the budget principles and information that have been discussed to date in the 2023 Village of Pemberton budget. It is an ongoing process and continued feedback and establishment of various rates and assumptions will be developed in the coming months, all in time for the May 15th deadline. So intent today is to go over some of the assumptions, highlight some of the work that's been done, and importantly, invite the public to provide any feedback. I love to remind everyone that they're welcome to email budget@pemberton.ca, provide feedback on what they're hearing. To date, we have not had any feedback. It's a lot of junk now. Great. Just to get this working. Excellent. Building the budget this year, we've changed the process a little bit to develop a bottoms-up budget. And it's largely driven by three underlying principles: service, cost efficiency, and accountability. So while we've been setting service mandates for each of the operating areas, which I'll talk about in a second, we've really tried to be efficient with costs where we've seen a lot of pressures in the economy. And we're trying to provide a lot of transparency in doing this. That transparency piece, both in what we presented, along with creating ownership with a lot of our new staff and people that are responsible for the budget. So we're really trying to make it user friendly. Late in 2022, staff sat down with mayor and council, and developed some major themes, which we've been applying through our development of the budget. Those largely are concentrated around organizational health, smart growth, emergency preparedness, environment, service excellence, reconciliation, regional transit, and flood mitigation. So in trying to use these drivers to develop service mandates for our operating budgets, the goal here is really to deliver service to make Pemberton a healthy, safe, and beautiful community. Staff are talking about these when we're looking at our budgets constantly. To break down where revenues and taxes collect, like where they collected and where they directed, at a very high level, we think about the tax revenues funding a various number of service areas. Those include public works and parks, fire services, development services, governance, administration, financial services, the airport, water, sewer, transit, projects, and reserves. And we often get this question of where does the breakdown go? What does the pie look like? On the back of every mail out to all of the property owners, taxpayers last year, we created this highlight where we demonstrate roughly a third is the municipal tax collection, but there is collection on behalf of other organizations, being school tax and police tax and SLRD and the regional health district as well. Expect a similar split this year as we develop the next stages of the budget, but people's tax dollars really go a long ways in the community and in a number of areas. And of course, I should highlight that a fundamental principle in budgeting in a municipality is the budget must balance. That is, we can't run a deficit. So through the various funding sources, there's requirements to fund operations and the day-to-day that everyone sees outside, the public works, the the parks and tax collections and development services. And there's some money that's set aside to reserve contributions. And that often is very important to think about the longevity and maintenance of future needs and balancing that with also some of the immediate needs and growth in projects. There are, I would highlight a couple of distinct reserve objectives that need to be applied here as we look at the various budgets and those legislated or contractual obligations inform some of the governance around the budgets as well. I do like to recommend that those that are interested in learning about how property taxes work, if it is kind of the black box, that they really look at some of the BC assessment info. Property taxes and the way we calculate them are largely derived from the assessed value, which is provided by BC assessment, the value of a property class. And in the municipality here, we set the property tax rates for these various categories on an annual basis. That mill rate or that rate per thousand multiplied by the assessed values is where property taxes are derived. There's really great though examples of that concept on the link I've noted below, and encourage anyone to look through that. It goes into depth of calculating that. I would highlight too that there isn't necessarily a defined or conclusive recommendation we can make how someone's property taxes will change every year. It's all about the relative position. And I wanted to highlight that here with what I thought was a pretty good graph. So where Pemberton's seen a significant increase in the assessed value more broadly, if a property has a lower than average change for the property class, it's possible that tax might decrease. If it's similar to the average, there's not likely necessarily a change. And if it's higher than the average change for a property class, it's possible that it would increase. So that relative relationship is very important, but it would be unique to property. So in around May, we mail out tax notices and between then and the due date of the first week of July, we've got people have an opportunity to inspect and review that as well, how it did. I believe a BC assessment notice went out already to property owners as well. Again, that relationship is really well explained on BC assessment, but I wanted to just talk about that because it often comes up when we see high market change. And more broadly, I did want to talk about what is informing a lot of the development of our operating budget this year. We are seeing pressures that are consistent with a lot of the consumer price index changes in BC. December 2022, a number we often look at. The market demonstrated a 6.6% increase year over year. What specifically we're seeing in Pemberton is there are a lot of cost pressures in a lot of our contract services and a lot of the day-to-day operations, and some of those are amplified because of geography, meaning some of our vendors that come out and do work and service, they're passing through some of those costs or attempting to. And over the past year, we've heard a lot about fuel surcharges contributing to that as well. That said, staff's been working very hard to challenge a lot of the proposed increases, reviewing contracts, ensuring we're going through competitive bid processes, and evaluating through our budget, our bottoms-up budget, how we can mitigate some of those pressures. That said, the other area where we are seeing continued cost pressures around a lot of the aging infrastructure, a lot of our fleets, a lot of our equipment is getting a lot older. We just conducted a large asset management review, and where we see that a lot of infrastructure was built in around 82 or 84, it's starting to come towards end of life. So toward the end of the presentation, I'll just briefly touch on why reserves are important to ensure there's healthy investment in the aging infrastructure. And then lastly, before I pause for any questions, I just wanted to highlight that specific to the village of Pemberton, what we've observed over the last couple of years has been incredibly high turnover with staff. And I highlight this because it's of great expense to the organization. And a great priority in this year's budget in terms of trying to stabilize that and avoid one-off costs and create a more stable workforce. Again, I think the proposals that will be presented in front of council will highlight that the recommendation endeavors to avoid large recruitment expenses and some of the costs that are accompanied with these very high rates of turnover that are approximately 3 times higher than an acceptable standard. So a couple of key initiatives that will be included involve conducting a review to ensure competitiveness amongst the comparators, making sure that the pay scale is in line with the market. Defining retention strategies and measures. We really need to be able to measure this and understand that the initiatives that are being undertaken are going to be effective in stabilizing and achieving this. And then there, especially with that turnover, with a very new workforce in a lot of areas, there will be targeted investment, training, development, and succession planning assumptions included in future iterations of the budget. Some of those are also important to note, driven by regulatory requirements, safety, and certification, so forth. And some of which are investing in staff and development and growth. I would highlight too, where over the past 2 years, there were like very material savings in some of these areas with the limits of COVID-19, mobilizing staff to invest in some of these has been very limited. Options were not always there for training and development, and where some return of these have only in-person components. We've been really disciplined and thorough in building a bottoms-up training budget that aligns with these initiatives. Maybe pause if there are any questions. And Ms. Fraser, I don't know if there's any online.
Not yet.
Okay. So the next segment of the presentation here, I did just want to highlight some of the key capital projects that have been identified in draft form. So just to clarify, nothing's been through the budget process. We haven't achieved a state of approval, but directionally these have been socialized and will be factored into the affordability discussion. Some of these, however, have been approved and are underway or have been funded fully by grants as well. So please allow me to speed up or slow down if I dig too deep or not enough. There's about probably 10 or 15 of these. The daycare project is a top priority on the organization. The New Spaces Fund has been instrumental in achieving this project. Site's already been prepared, or preparation has started, and construction will be starting in 2023 with an estimated completion in early 2024. The next step, which is very important in the community, is the water treatment facility. So the proposal would be predicated upon the results of the grant application, and the proposal would be jointly funded. What this would do would be replace the existing facilities and provide additional filtration and largely address some of the identified needs to address iron and manganese levels. So we'll allow for future growth as well. And it importantly centralizes some of the water operations, and the proposed location is next to the existing reservoirs. There's some benefits to that consolidation. Next up, I'd highlight the Fernwood water main and pressure reducing valve replacements. As part of the essential distribution system, it's end of life, and the proposed funding would be through gas tax and reserves. It would be phased in for 2023, proposing an estimated cost of $280,000. McCrae Road water main upsizing is another project here of a similar order of magnitude, $270,000. The current water main supplied, it crosses private property, and there's a lease obligation to upsize this as well. But the real forward-looking benefit to this as well is it would accommodate and allow for increased capacity when servicing the industrial park and water main looping. So great benefit to that one as well. There's the proposal for industrial park generator. This is a deferred project, but it's important to stabilize and provide security around the industrial park, especially through power outages, and will meet the growing needs of that area. That's a $100,000 capital item. Onto fire, I'd highlight in the 5-year plan, there will be a presentation of some of the ongoing needs. A lot of the equipment's reaching end of life, exceeding 30 years. And there's a long lead for that. Engine 10 replacement as it is reaching end of life. The proposal here includes an estimated $150,000 for ordering of the chassis, which would be incurred in 2023, with the rest of the truck built on top of that and delivered in 2025 for a total cost of $750,000. There are a number of priorities around level 3 75 kilowatt fast chargers as a strong recommendation and a result of the Community Climate Action Plan. There's a lot of attention around EV chargers and supporting that infrastructure, and the grants are there to support those. So there's another $150,000 estimated in the budget, and that would be in line with the proposed or with the approved grants from Natural Resources Canada. I would also like to highlight the amenity building at Danduff Park. So where the second of the 2 soccer fields was completed last year, the hydro was energized to light up the fields. There still is part of that grant funding, and there are a number of partners in that. There still is an amenity building and parking lot. So the estimated budget of this in line with the remaining funds is $2.6 million. And the design is being completed, but I just wanted to highlight for those that might not be familiar with some of the vision that this is a shared space that'll include bathrooms and storage and a snack bar, community space, and a parking lot adjacent where there will be some EV chargers as well. That's the largest funding share is through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and construction slated to start this year. There's some preload and work that's been done already there, and that's kind of located between the soccer fields and the bike skills park. Well, exciting, there's so many. The park and ride. This is a project which is funded through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the Rural and Northern Communities Program. And this is a very important project in the ability to promote transit and get people out of their cars and have the option to better utilize the bus. The design is scheduled for 2023 and estimated construction completion is in 2026. It's a $1.9 million budget. And that's one that we would have I believe chatted about last year in the budget cycle, but I think an important one to remind everyone of. And then I also wanted to just highlight more broadly, a lot of our public works and operations fleet is reaching end of life. There's some safety concerns and retirements that have resulted from just that. And there's the opportunity to revisit what was previously in the budget. Last year, some might recall there was a Western Star, this big heavy duty snowplow in the budget. And with some of the growth in the hillside development and the success that the team has seen with some of the lighter duty 550 fleet and the utilization of smaller and more fuel efficient equipment, the team's proposing this kind of revisited and optimized plan to deliver the fleet upgrades. So included in this and proposed to be funded through borrowing through MFA and reserves include the bucket truck replacement. So it was a safety issue, hole in the floor. Team worked really hard to keep it running, but it needed to be retired. That's what the community might see as a truck that replaces street lamps and does a lot of critical safety stuff around the community. Proposals for a F550 plow and sander. Again, that supports a lot of the hillside communities as well as summer operations. So it's got a lot more ability to service the needs of the community as it grows. And then replacing the old 2008 pickup truck, the one which is also reaching end of life. There's a proposal for a replacement 8-foot bed truck, which would be in service through the year. That was what I highlighted wanted to highlight in the capital budget set up. It's some of the larger items. I would highlight for anyone that is looking, previous presentation includes a more in-depth look at the comprehensive list, and future budgets will have iterations of the final list and ultimately result in approval. So it is subject to change, but I want to highlight some of the larger projects. And I did want to highlight some of the coming work. We don't have, just due to the nature of where we are in the budget process, all of the proposals today, but reserves and investing in saving for maintenance and replacement and upgrading old assets. Essentially, we want to highlight the importance of the reserves and some of the work that we just went through with the consultant, Your City. So I would highlight that it was identified there's an opportunity to put a little bit more away from reserves from our consultants. We evaluated various scenarios and worked with them to look at the health score of the village. It does take into account current infrastructure, and as we know, we're growing, so there is a little more pressure as well. But we looked at a few scenarios that maintain this 76 to 93% ratio. This health score is a common metric as they've worked with various communities in British Columbia and been quite well recognized, but essentially it covers the consumption, so how far along the lifespan of an asset is, and the past life ratio, how many of the assets are past their useful life. At that point, they tend to break down and need a lot more maintenance, costs a lot more money. So investing in infrastructure and maintaining it will promote a healthy score and maintain healthy assets. In the view here was largely around affordability as well. So of the scenarios that were presented and what we'll bring forward in a future session, they modeled out a few scenarios where the investment for the average homeowner would be an incremental $56 to $78 a year. And staff will bring forward some of these recommendations for council's direction and feedback as well. I did just want to, I bring this up from time to time, but I did want to highlight that before that May 15th session, we do have a few more or May 15th deadline, we do have a few more sessions as highlighted in the blue. Next sessions include reviewing the operating budget draft and some of the tax implications. So those aren't what we're discussing today. And then I would highlight too, along the way, council provides, staff provides a draft of the budget for council's review and input. But along the way, we continue to monitor if we hear anything from the public. Again, the budget at pemberton.ca email is one channel, but reaching councillors or providing inputs helpful as we take this input and develop a cost-effective budget that meets service, cost efficiency and accountability priorities. Any questions?
Any questions from council? No. But in public.
Do you want to call for questions from the public? Because they're very clear.
So we're gonna open the floor to questions from the public on the budget at this time. If you're on Zoom, hit the raise hand feature and staff will know that you want to ask a question. Well, your microphone. I'm gonna give it a half a sec. Nope. All right, good. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation and look forward to the next budget session. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Or you can call me.